The storage unit door was open exactly 4 inches, and through the gap I could see my own work schedule taped to the wall with every bathroom break I'd taken in the last month written in red marker underneath. Let me back up. My name's Kyle, and I've been working security at Safekeep Storage on Route 42 outside Bakersfield for about 3 years now. It's not glamorous work. Honestly, most nights I'm just checking gates, walking the rows, and making sure nobody's sleeping in their units or trying to move out after hours without paying. The facility runs 24/7, but overnight it's just me, a golf cart, a flashlight, and about 200 storage units spread across 6 acres. I took the job right after my divorce went through. Needed something quiet, something where I didn't have to talk to people much. Night shift paid an extra $2 an hour, and frankly, I preferred being awake when most of the world was asleep. Fewer questions that way. The facility itself is pretty standard. Climate controlled units closer to the office, regular units in the back rows, vehicle storage along the east fence, chain link everywhere, sodium lights every 30 feet, 3 entrance gates with keypads. My job was simple: log gate activity, do foot patrols every 2 hours, respond to any alarms, and call the cops if anything looked wrong. For the first 2.5 years, nothing ever looked wrong. It was a Tuesday in October when I first noticed something off. I was reviewing the gate logs around 2 a.m., just routine paperwork, when I saw an entry that didn't make sense. Unit 217 had been accessed at 1:43 a.m., but I'd walked past that unit at 1:30 during my patrol, and the lock was definitely secure. I remember because the tenant had one of those bright yellow master locks that caught the light. I figured maybe the system glitched. Our software was old, ran on a Windows machine that probably should have been retired in 2008. I made a note in my log and didn't think much about it. 3 nights later, it happened again. Different unit this time. 109. Gate log showed access at 3:22 a.m. I'd been sitting in the office at 3:22 a.m. watching the security monitor that covered that entire row. Nobody had gone near Unit 109. I started paying closer attention after that. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented 11 separate instances of phantom gate entries, always between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. Always units in the back rows, away from the main office. Always when I was either in the office or on the opposite side of the property. The thing that bothered me most was the timing. Whoever was doing this, if anyone was doing this, knew exactly where I'd be. They were accessing units during the precise windows when I wouldn't see them. I didn't report it to my supervisor yet. Dale was the kind of guy who'd blame me for the glitches, suggest I wasn't doing my patrols right, maybe dock my pay for the phantom entries on my watch. I needed more evidence before I brought him into it, so I changed my routine. Instead of doing patrols every 2 hours like clockwork, I started varying my schedule. I'd wait an extra 20 minutes, or go early by 15. I'd skip the golf cart sometimes and walk the rows on foot so I could move quieter. I started carrying my phone to take photos of locks, timestamps, anything that seemed relevant. That's when things got weird. The phantom entries stopped completely. For 5 straight nights, nothing. No unexplained gate logs, no odd activity. Everything was normal. I actually started to relax. Figured maybe it had been a software issue after all, something that resolved itself. And on the 6th night, I found the chair. It was in the back corner of the property, in the little alcove between units 341 and 342. Just a folding lawn chair, the cheap aluminum kind you'd take to a kid's soccer game. It was positioned facing the main office, about 150 yards away. There was a clear sight line from that chair to the office window where I usually sat. I checked the units on either side, both locked tight, no signs of tampering. I looked around for any other evidence: cigarette butts, food wrappers, anything. Nothing. Just a chair. I folded it up and brought it back to the office. Put it in the storage closet and logged it as abandoned property. Told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe a tenant had used it while moving stuff and forgot it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been sitting in that chair, watching me. I started checking that alcove every night during my patrols. The chair never came back, but I'd get this crawling sensation on my neck whenever I walked past those units, like I was being observed. 2 weeks went by. Nothing unusual in the logs, no more phantom entries. I was starting to think I'd imagined the whole thing, that the stress of working alone all night was getting to me. Then I found the notebook. It was in Unit 217, the same unit that had the first phantom entry back in October. The tenant, a guy named Mr. Holloway, had called that morning to say he'd lost his key and needed us to cut his lock. Standard procedure. I went out there around 10 p.m. with bolt cutters, removed his old lock, and left a notice on his door that he needed to come by the office for a new key. When I opened the unit to verify it was empty enough to leave unsecured overnight, I saw it immediately. The unit wasn't Mr. Holloway's stuff. I mean, his stuff was there. Boxes of Christmas decorations, some old furniture, the usual storage unit contents. But in the back corner, someone had set up a small living space, a sleeping bag, a battery-powered lantern, a plastic bin with canned food and bottled water, and on top of the bin, a spiral notebook. My hands were shaking when I picked it up. I knew I shouldn't touch it. This was evidence of something. I just didn't know what yet, but I opened it anyway. The first page was a schedule, my schedule. Every shift I'd worked for the last 6 weeks was written down in neat handwriting. What time I arrived, what time I took my breaks, what route I took during patrols, how long I spent in the office versus on the property. There were notes about which nights I used the golf cart and which nights I walked. Notes about when I ate my lunch and where I usually parked my truck. I flipped through the pages, feeling my stomach turn over. The notebook had diagrams of the facility layout with my patrol routes drawn in different colored pens. There were notes about blind spots in the camera coverage, areas where someone could move without being seen on the monitors. There were timestamps for every gate code entry, with annotations about which tenants came during which shifts. Whoever wrote this had been studying the facility like it was a military operation, and they'd been studying me most of all. On the last page, with writing, there was a single sentence, pattern confirmed. Moving to phase 2. The date written next to it was from 3 days ago. I closed the notebook and got out of that unit fast. Locked it back up with a new padlock from our spare supply and went straight to the office. Called Dale first, got his voicemail. Of course I did. It was 10:30 at night. Called the Bakersfield Police non-emergency line next. The dispatcher asked if there was an active threat. I said I didn't know. Maybe. Someone had been living in a storage unit without authorization, documenting security patterns. That was trespassing at minimum, right? And she said she'd send an officer when one became available. Might be an hour or two. I sat in the office with every light on, watching the security monitors like my life depended on it. I kept the notebook on the desk in front of me, too afraid to open it again, but too afraid to put it away. 40 minutes passed, no cop yet. I did a perimeter check from inside the office. All the gates were closed. No movement on any of the cameras. I thought about leaving, just getting in my truck and driving away until the police showed up, but that felt like exactly what whoever wrote the notebook would expect me to do. That's when I noticed Unit 217 on the monitor. The door was open, not all the way, just a few inches, enough that I could see it was definitely open, even though I'd locked it myself less than an hour ago. I stared at the screen. The camera covering that row was black and white, grainy, but I could see the gap clearly. The new padlock I'd put on was lying on the ground in front of the unit. Someone had cut it off. My phone rang and I nearly jumped out of my chair. It was the police dispatcher calling back. The officer was still 20 minutes out. It had been a domestic disturbance call that took priority. Could I stay safe in the office until they arrived? I said yes, but I was lying. I grabbed my flashlight, left my phone on the desk still connected to the dispatcher, and headed out to Unit 217. I know that sounds stupid. I know I should have waited. But whoever was in that unit had been watching me for weeks. They'd been living on the property, studying my every move, and I needed to know why. I needed to see them. The walk from the office to Unit 217 felt like it took an hour. Every shadow looked wrong. Every sound made me flinch. The sodium lights cast everything in that sick yellow glow that makes everything look old and faded. When I got close, I could see the door was open wider now. It's about a foot. The padlock was definitely on the ground, cut clean through with bolt cutters. Professional job, quick and quiet. I stopped about 10 feet away and called out, "Security, I know you're in there. Police are on the way. Come out with your hands visible." Nothing. Just the hum of the lights and distant traffic from Route 42. I took another step closer. "I found your notebook. I know you've been watching me. Whatever this is, we can talk about it." Still nothing. I moved to the side, tried to get an angle to see into the unit without putting myself directly in the doorway. From what I could see, the living setup in the back corner was gone. Sleeping bag, lantern, food bin, all of it. The unit looked like it had, when I'd first opened it, just Mr. Holloway's legitimate storage items. That's when I saw the second notebook. It was lying right inside the door, placed deliberately where I'd see it. New notebook, different from the first one. The cover was red instead of blue. Every instinct I had screamed at me not to pick it up, but I did anyway. The first page had today's date at the top. Below that, in the same neat handwriting, "You changed your pattern. Good. That means you're paying attention." I flipped to the next page. It was my schedule again, but this time it went forward instead of backward. Tomorrow's shift, the day after, the whole next week, every break I was supposed to take, every patrol I was supposed to do. But there were notes in the margins. "Will vary by 15 to 20 minutes. Will walk instead of cart at least twice. Will check alcove near 341. They'd predicted how I'd change my routine. The next page showed the facility layout again, but this time there were X marks on specific units, 8 of them total, scattered across the property. Below the diagram, "Accessed while you adjusted. You can't cover everything." My mouth went dry. While I'd been varying my patrols, feeling smart for changing my pattern, this person had been accessing 8 other units, learning them, setting up in them maybe. The final page with writing had a longer note. "You're good at your job, Kyle. Observant. Careful. That's why I chose this facility. But you can't watch everywhere at once. You can't predict what you can't see coming. Phase 2 begins tomorrow night. You should call in sick." That last sentence was underlined 3 times. I heard footsteps behind me and spun around, flashlight up. It was the cop, finally. Young guy, couldn't have been more than 25, hand resting on his service weapon but not drawing it. He parked his cruiser by the office and walked up quiet. "You the one who called in the trespassing?" he asked. I nodded, handed him both notebooks without a word. While he read through them, I explained everything. The Phantom Gate entries, the chair, the living setup, the schedules and diagrams. He took notes, asked good questions, didn't treat me like I was crazy. When I got to the part about the 8X marks on the diagram, he called for backup. We spent the next 3 hours opening every unit marked on that diagram. The cop had to get authorization from our corporate office. Wake up, Dale. Whole procedure. But by 4 a.m., we checked all 8. 6 of them were normal, just regular storage contents, nothing disturbed. The 7th had another sleeping bag set up, fresh, like someone had just put it there tonight. Battery lantern, water bottles, canned food, no notebook this time. The 8th unit, number 163, was completely empty except for a laptop sitting in the center of the floor. The cop wouldn't let me touch it, said it was evidence now, we needed to bag it proper, but when he opened it to check for any obvious identifying information, the screen lit up automatically. It was surveillance footage. Not from our cameras, from somewhere else. Different angle, better quality. It showed the inside of the office where I worked every night. Someone had put a camera in the office, pointed right at my desk, at the monitors, at everything. The footage on the laptop was from tonight. I could see myself sitting there earlier, reviewing logs, drinking coffee. The timestamp in the corner showed it was still recording. I turned slowly and looked back toward the office. 100 yards away across the dark facility. The windows were lit up, visible from where we stood. We need to sweep that office, the cop said quietly. Right now. We found 3 cameras total, one hidden in the smoke detector above my desk, one in the corner bookshelf behind some binders, one in the break room pointed at the schedule board where I noted my breaks. All wireless, all battery powered, all placed perfectly to document everything I did during my shifts. The cop bagged all of it as evidence, called in a detective who showed up around 6 a.m., right as my shift was ending. They took my statement, took the notebooks, took the laptop, told me to go home and get some rest. Dale showed up around 7, furious about being woken up, furious about the police presence, furious about having to deal with all this. He seemed more angry about the inconvenience than concerned about the fact that someone had been stalking his night security guard for weeks. I told him I needed a few days off. He said fine, but I wasn't getting paid for them. The detective called me 2 days later with an update. They'd traced the laptop, that it had been purchased with cash at a Best Buy in Fresno 3 months ago. No usable information there. The cameras were commercially available. Same story. The notebooks had no prints, except mine and the cops, but they'd checked the footage from all 3 cameras, reviewed every second that had been recorded. The person who placed them had been careful, always wore gloves, always kept their face away from the angles, always moved during my patrol times when I wasn't in the office. But they got sloppy once. There was a 3-second clip from 5 weeks ago where someone's reflection appeared in the office window at night. Just a silhouette, but enough to get a height estimate and build. Male, probably between 5'9" and 6 feet tall, average build. They enhanced the image as much as they could, but couldn't get any facial features. The detective asked if I recognized anyone matching that description who'd been acting strangely around the facility. I went through the list of regular tenants in my head, couldn't think of anyone specific. We had probably 60 or 70 people with units who came and went during my shifts. Could have been any of them, or none of them. Here's the thing, the detective said. We checked those 8 units on the diagram, cross-referenced them with tenant records. Want to know what they have in common? I waited. Every single one of those tenants works night shifts. Hospital staff, warehouse workers, truck drivers, they access their units during the day or early evening, never during your overnight shift. Whoever scouted these units knew that they picked spaces they could use without the real tenants ever knowing. What about Mr. Holloway's unit? I asked. The first one. He's retired. He could come by any time. We contacted Mr. Holloway, the detective said. He hasn't been to his unit in 4 months. Pays automatically through his bank. Whoever was using his space knew that too. I felt cold. So this person, they studied the tenants as much as they studied me. Looks that way. And Kyle, that note about phase 2, we think you should take it seriously. Is there somewhere else you can stay for a while? Family? Friends? I ended up staying with my brother in Visalia for 2 weeks. Dale hired a temporary guard to cover my shifts. Ex-cop named Randy, who apparently carried 3 guns and a taser and told Dale straight up he wasn't going out to check units alone after dark until this got resolved. The police increased patrols around the facility, put out a request for information, Checked with other storage facilities in the area to see if they'd had similar incidents. Nothing turned up. After 2 weeks, the detective called again. They were treating it as an ongoing investigation, but without more evidence or another incident, there wasn't much they could do. The surveillance was illegal, the trespassing was documented, but without a suspect, they couldn't make an arrest. He asked if I wanted to come back to work or if I'd rather find another job. Said he'd understand either way. I thought about it for a long time. The smart thing would have been to quit, find a different facility, maybe switch to day shift somewhere. But that felt like letting whoever did this win. They wanted me scared, wanted me to change everything. So I went back, but I didn't go back the same way I'd left. First, I had the entire office swept by a private security company. Found 2 more cameras we'd missed. One in the parking lot, light fixture pointed at my truck. One in the bathroom. Whoever this was had been thorough. Second, I installed my own cameras. Good ones, hidden ones, covering angles the facility cameras missed. I documented everything. Every car that pulled into the lot, every person who accessed the unit during my shift, every shadow that moved wrong. Third, I stopped following patterns completely. I'd show up early, leave late, take breaks at random times. Some nights I'd do 6 patrols, some nights I'd do 2. I'd park in different spots, use different routes, never settle into anything predictable. And fourth, I started carrying. I'd never been a gun guy before, but I got my permit and bought a 9mm. Took a safety course, went to the range twice a week, learned how to handle it properly. I didn't tell Dale. It was technically against company policy, but I figured company policy didn't account for being stalked by someone who'd invested months into studying my every move. 3 months went by without incident. Then 6. The police moved on to other cases. Dale stopped asking about it. Randy went back to his regular security job. Everything returned to normal, except I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. Little things would happen that I couldn't quite explain. I'd find my truck unlocked in the morning, even though I knew I'd locked it. I'd see the same car parked on Route 42 at odd hours, different car each time, but always just sitting there with the engine running. I'd get hang-up calls on the office phone at 3 a.m. Nothing concrete, nothing I could report, just a wrongness. It's been 1.5 years now since I found that first notebook. I still work at Safekeep, still do the night shift, still check that alcove near 341 every single patrol. I never found out who was watching me, never got a name, never saw a face. The case is still technically open, but I know it's never getting solved. Sometimes I wonder if they're still out there, if they moved on to another facility, another guard, if they finished whatever phase 2 was supposed to be and I just never noticed, or if they're waiting for me to fall back into a pattern. I don't sleep well anymore. When I do sleep, I dream about opening storage units and finding notebooks filled with my life, written by someone I've never met. I dream about cameras hidden in places I haven't checked yet. I dream about that reflection in the office window, just out of focus, watching me watch the monitors. Last week I found something that brought it all back. I was doing a late patrol around 3 a.m., checking the back rows near where the vehicle storage is. There's a unit back there, number 407, that's been marked delinquent for 2 months. Tenant stopped paying, stopped responding to calls. We were supposed to auction off the contents next week. The lock was cut. Same professional job as before. Clean cut through the shackle. I called the police immediately. Waited for them to arrive before I opened it. Took 40 minutes this time. They're slower to respond now that it's been so long since the original incident. When we finally opened Unit 407, it was empty. Completely empty. No belongings, no setup, nothing, except for a single folding lawn chair in the center of the space, facing the door. And on the chair, a blue spiral notebook. The cop, a different guy this time, didn't know the history. He picked it up and flipped through it. It's blank, he said, handing it to me. Every page probably just trashed the previous tenant left, but I knew better. I took the notebook home with me when my shift ended, sat at my kitchen table as the sun came up and went through every single page, looking for something I knew had to be there. On the very last page, written in pencil, so light, I almost missed it. Phase 2, complete. You're welcome. I still don't know what that means. I don't know what phase 2 was, or why someone would thank me for it. I don't know if the year and a half of quiet was the phase, or if something happened that I never noticed. I just know that someone spent months watching me, studying me, living in the spaces between my patterns, and then they disappeared, leaving nothing but questions and a notebook full of blank pages. I think about that last message a lot. You're welcome. Welcome for what? For making me paranoid? For teaching me that nowhere is safe? That anyone could be watching? That patterns are traps? Or welcome for something else? Something I still haven't figured out? I don't have good answers. I don't have closure. I just have a job I still show up to every night, a 9mm I carry everywhere now, and the certain knowledge that someone out there knows me better than I know myself. If you work security, night shift especially, pay attention to patterns, yours and everyone else's. If gate logs don't make sense, follow up. If you find something that shouldn't be there, document it. If you feel watched, trust that feeling. And if someone ever leaves you a notebook full of your own life written in someone else's handwriting, break every pattern you have. Don't give them the satisfaction of being predictable, because they're counting on it. The carton of milk in my sister's fridge had an expiration date from next week, and I'd been in the house for 6 days without leaving once to buy groceries. I need to explain how I got here first. My name's Trevor, and my sister Amanda asked me to house sit while she and her husband took their kids to Disney World for 2 weeks. She lives in one of those cookie cutter subdivisions outside Sacramento, the kind where every third house has the same floor plan, just mirrored. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, attached garage, small backyard with a fence, built in 2016, still relatively new. She'd normally have a neighbor check on the place, but there'd been some break-ins in the area recently. Nothing major, mostly garage thefts, someone stealing packages off porches. But Amanda was nervous about leaving the house completely empty for that long, and I'd just finished a contract job that left me with some free time. The deal was simple. Stay at her place, water the plants, bring in the mail, make sure everything looked lived in to deter any opportunistic thieves. She'd stocked the fridge and pantry before she left, told me to help myself to anything, left me detailed instructions for the security system and the thermostat, and which neighbor to call if anything went wrong. Easy money. 2 weeks of quiet in a nicer house than my apartment. No rent. Free food. I loaded up my laptop and some clothes and moved in the day they left for the airport. The first 3 days were completely normal. I worked remotely from her dining room table, took walks around the neighborhood in the evening, watched TV on their nice setup in the living room. The house was comfortable, quiet, exactly what I needed. On the 4th day, I noticed the dishes. I'd made breakfast that morning, eggs, toast, coffee, left the pan and plate in the sink because I was lazy and figured I'd wash them later. Went upstairs to take a shower, came back down about 40 minutes later. The dishes were clean and put away. I stood in the kitchen staring at the empty sink for a solid minute, trying to remember if I had actually washed them and forgot. But no, I specifically remembered leaving them there, remembered thinking I'd deal with them after my shower. I checked the dishwasher. The pan was in the drying rack. The plate was back in the cabinet where it belonged. Everything was clean, dry, put away properly. Amanda had told me the house cleaner wasn't scheduled to come while she was gone. And even if she had come, she wouldn't have a key. Amanda hadn't mentioned anything about anyone else having access to the house. I checked the security system panel by the front door, armed when I'd gotten in the shower, disarmed when I came back down. I was the only one who knew the code. Weird, but I convinced myself I'd just had a brain fog moment. Maybe I'd washed the dishes on autopilot before my shower and forgot. It happens. The next day, I took out the trash. The bin in the kitchen was full, so I pulled the bag out, tied it off, took it out to the garage to put in the big can. When I came back inside about 2 minutes later, there was a fresh bag in the kitchen bin, properly fitted, even had that little tie at the top the way Amanda always did it. I hadn't put that bag in. I went back to the garage, checked the box of trash bags on the shelf. One was missing from the roll, the one now in the kitchen, but I hadn't taken it. I'd been in the garage the entire time. I would have seen someone come through, unless they came through while I was outside. I started checking the house, walked through every room, looked in closets, checked the locks on all the doors and windows. Everything was secure. No signs of forced entry, no one hiding anywhere. But someone had been in the house twice now, doing chores. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing normal house sounds, the AC kicking on, the ice maker in the fridge, the wood settling. But every sound made me sit up in bed, listening, trying to determine if it was the house or something else. Around 3 a.m., I finally dozed off. I woke up at 7 to the smell of coffee. I don't drink coffee. Never have. Can't stand the taste. Amanda knew this, that she'd left me tea bags and told me where the kettle was, never mentioned the coffee maker. But when I came downstairs, there was a fresh pot brewing in the kitchen. The machine was on, steam rising, that bitter smell filling the whole first floor. My hands were shaking when I unplugged it. I checked the security panel again, still armed from when I'd set it before bed. No alerts, no record of it being disarmed and rearmed. I called Amanda, got her voicemail. Of course, they were in the middle of their vacation, probably at the parks. I left a message trying to sound calm, asking if she'd given anyone else access to the house, maybe someone she forgot to mention. She called back 2 hours later. No, she said, no one else had keys. No cleaner scheduled, no maintenance, nothing. Was everything okay? I didn't tell her about the dishes or the trash or the coffee. Just said, yeah, everything's fine. Must have been confused about something. She said, okay. Told me they were having a great time. Hung up. I spent the rest of that day searching the house more thoroughly. I checked every window lock twice, tested every door, looked under beds and in the attic access. Nothing. But when I opened the fridge to grab lunch, I saw it. The milk carton. Whole milk, Amanda's brand. The one she always bought from that organic place she liked. Expiration date was next Thursday, 9 days away. I'd been drinking the milk Amanda left since I arrived. I'd finished that carton yesterday, threw it in the recycling myself. I know because I'd made a note to buy more if I needed it. This was a new carton, fresh, the kind that would have been purchased within the last day or two. I hadn't bought it. I hadn't left the house, except to walk around the neighborhood. There was no delivery service. I'd checked Amanda's accounts, no Instacart or Amazon fresh scheduled. Someone had been in this house. Someone had gone shopping. Someone had bought milk and put it in the fridge while I was here. I grabbed my phone and called the non-emergency police line, explained the situation, house sitting, things appearing, no signs of break-in, but someone was definitely getting inside. The dispatcher said she'd send an officer to do a welfare check and take a report. The cop showed up about 30 minutes later. Young woman, professional, took notes while I explained everything. She walked through the house with me, checked all the entry points, looked at the security system. No signs of forced entry, she said. And you said the alarm's been set every night? Every night. I'm the only one with the code. Could your sister have given the code to someone? A neighbor, maybe, just in case? She said no. I asked her specifically. The officer looked at the milk carton, then at me. I could see her trying to decide if I was paranoid or if there was a real issue here. Look, she said finally. I can file a report for trespassing, but without evidence of forced entry or anything missing, there's not much we can do. My advice? Change the alarm code. Maybe stay somewhere else for the night. Come back tomorrow with fresh eyes. I thanked her and she left. I didn't change the code. If someone was getting in despite the alarm, a new code wouldn't help. But I did decide to stay up that night, all night, see if I could catch whoever was doing this. I made myself tea, set up on the couch in the living room with all the lights off, and waited. Midnight came and went. Nothing. 1 a.m. Still nothing. Around 2:15 a.m., I heard it. A soft scraping sound. Not from upstairs, not from outside, from below me. The crawl space. Amanda's house had a crawl space foundation, about 3 feet of clearance under the first floor, accessible through a small wooden panel in the hallway closet. I'd seen it when I'd searched the house earlier, but it was secured with screws and I hadn't thought to check it. The scraping came again. Definitely movement. Something or someone shifting around under the house. I sat frozen on the couch, barely breathing. The sound moved, slowly, deliberately, tracking along under the living room toward the kitchen. Then it stopped. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. I got up as quietly as I could and went to the hallway closet, opened it slowly, looked at the crawl space panel. The screws were there. All 4 of them, securing the panel to the frame. But they were loose. I could see it now that I was looking closely. The screw heads were stripped, worn, like they'd been removed and replaced many times. The panel itself had slight scratch marks around the edges. Someone had been using this access point regularly. I should have left right then. Should have gone to a hotel, called the police again, let them handle it. But I needed to know. Needed to see what was down there. I got a screwdriver from Amanda's garage, came back, and removed all 4 screws as quietly as possible, lifted the panel away carefully. The smell hit me first. Not bad. Just musty, damp, that underground smell. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and shined it into the opening. The crawlspace looked normal at first. Dirt floor, support beams, insulation hanging from the underside of the house. But then I saw the path. Someone had cleared a route through the dirt, a narrow trail running from the access panel toward the back of the house. And along that trail, there were items. A sleeping bag, folded neatly, a plastic storage bin, a camping lantern. Someone had been living down there. I heard the scraping sound again, closer now, and my phone light caught movement at the far end of the crawl space. A person was crawling toward me. I scrambled backward, dropping the panel, nearly falling as I backed out of the closet. My brain was screaming at me to run, get out of the house, but I couldn't move. I just stood there in the hallway, staring at that open panel. A hand appeared first, then a head, then shoulders. A man pulled himself up through the opening and stood up in the hallway, about 6 feet from me. He was maybe 40, average height, wearing dirty jeans and a gray hoodie. His hands were filthy from the crawlspace dirt, but his face was clean, almost unnaturally clean, like he'd recently washed it. We stared at each other for what felt like an hour, but was probably 5 seconds. "You're up late," he said calmly. His voice was normal, conversational, like we were neighbors chatting over a fence. "Who the fuck are you?" I managed to say. "I live here," he said simply. "Well, under here, technically. I've been taking care of the place while the family's away." My brain couldn't process what he was saying. You did the dishes, the trash. Of course. Can't leave messes around. Bad for the property value. He said it like it was obvious, like I was the weird one for questioning it. "The milk," I said. "You bought milk." "You were running low. Noticed you like the organic brand, same as the owners. Picked it up this morning while you were working. He gestured toward the living room. You sit at the dining table every day from 9 to 5. Very consistent schedule. Makes it easy to run errands. I felt my legs shaking. How long have you been here? In this house? He thought about it. 8 months, give or take, since last summer. They're good people, a family, very routine. Bed by 10, work during the day, kids have soccer practice Tuesdays and Thursdays. Easy to work around. They don't know you're here. Of course not. That would be awkward. He smiled a little. I'm careful, quiet, helpful when I can be. I take care of things. Little repairs, keep the crawl space dry, make sure the HVAC filters get changed. Think of me as a live-in handyman they don't pay for. You're insane, I said. His smile faded. I'm practical. Do you know how much rent costs in Sacramento? How hard it is to find affordable housing? This arrangement works. I have shelter. They have a well-maintained home. Everyone benefits. You're trespassing, breaking and entering. I'm calling the police. I reached for my phone, but he was faster. Not threatening. He just held up his hand in a stop gesture. I wouldn't do that, he said quietly. I've been very nice about sharing this space with you. I could have stayed hidden, let you finish your 2 weeks without ever knowing. But you're not respecting the routine. Making coffee at odd hours, staying up past midnight, searching the house. You're disrupting things. This isn't your house, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. It's not yours either. He took a step closer. I've been here longer than you. I know this place better than you. Every loose floorboard, every draft, every sound it makes. I've maintained it, improved it. What have you done? Eaten their food and used their Wi-Fi? I backed toward the front door. He didn't follow, just watched me. If you call the police, he said, I'll be gone before they arrive. I have exits you don't know about, and I'll come back. Maybe not to this house, but there are 6 other homes in this neighborhood with accessible crawl spaces. I've already surveyed them, already know their routines. You're threatening me? I'm explaining reality. He sat down on the floor, right there in the hallway, crossed his legs, relaxed. You're going to finish your house sitting. You're going to tell your sister everything was fine. And you're going to forget you saw me. In exchange, I'll stay out of sight for the rest of your visit. No more helpful chores, no more shared space. I'll be a ghost. And if I don't agree, he shrugged, then we'll have problems. And I'm very good at solving problems quietly. I should have run, should have gone straight to my car and driven away. But something about the way he was sitting there, calm and casual, made me angry instead of scared. There's no fucking way I'm just letting you stay here, I said. Then call the police. He gestured to my phone. Go ahead, but know that I've been in this house every single night for 8 months. I know where your sister keeps her spare cash. I know which window in the kids' room has a broken lock. I know that the sliding glass door in back doesn't latch properly if you lift while you close it. Do you think this is the only house I know that well? He was right. Even if the cops came right now, even if they searched and found his setup in the crawl space, he'd just move on to another house, another family who'd never know he was there. Why are you telling me all this? I asked. Because you seem reasonable, he said, and because I don't want to move. This is a good house, good family. I've put work into it. I'd rather we come to an understanding. I pulled out my phone. He watched me, didn't move. I dialed 911. He sighed, stood up, and before the dispatcher could answer, he dropped back down through the crawl space panel and disappeared. I could hear him moving fast under the house, crawling away toward somewhere. The dispatcher answered. 911? What's your emergency? There's someone in the house, I said, my voice shaking now that he was gone. He's been living in the crawl space. He's still here, under the house. They sent 3 units. The officers arrived within 6 minutes, surrounded the house, searched the entire crawl space with flashlights and thermal imaging. They found the sleeping bag, the storage bin, the camping lantern. They found a plastic bag with toiletries, toothbrush, soap, deodorant. They found a notebook, but they didn't find him. One of the officers showed me the notebook. It was a log, dates, times, observations, 8 months of entries documenting the family's routine, what time they woke up, what they ate for breakfast, when they left for work and school, when they came home, TV shows they watched, arguments they had, phone calls they made. On the last page from 2 days ago, house sitter arrived, male, late 20s, works from home. Routine, wakes at 7, works 9 to 5, walks at 6 p.m., bed by 11, disruption minimal. Below that, from earlier tonight, house sitter aware, situation contained, preparing alternate location. The officers searched the crawl space thoroughly, found 4 other access points I hadn't known about, one leading to the garage, one to the backyard, one to the neighbor's yard, and one to a storm drain that connected to the street. He built an entire network of escape routes. They printed the scene, took the evidence, filed a report. One of the detectives came by the next morning to talk to me, took my full statement. He told me they were checking other homes in the subdivision, looking for similar signs of intrusion. We think he's been doing this for a while, the detective said. We've had reports in 3 other neighborhoods over the past 2 years. Someone living in crawl spaces, attics, even garden sheds, never takes anything valuable, never violent, just exists in these spaces. We've never caught him. What about the notebook? I asked. His handwriting, his DNA on the stuff you found. We're running it all. But this guy is careful. If he's been doing this as long as we think, he knows how to avoid leaving evidence we can use. I asked if I should stay in the house. The detective said it was up to me, but they'd be doing regular patrols for the next week. He didn't think the guy would come back to this specific house. Too much attention now. I stayed. Not because I was brave, but because I'd promised Amanda I'd watch the place. And honestly, leaving felt like letting him win. The remaining 8 days were quiet. No mysterious chores, no sounds from the crawl space. The police patrol came by twice a day, checked the perimeter, made sure I was okay. But I couldn't sleep right. Every normal house sound made me think he was back. Every creak, every settling beam, every gust of wind against the siding. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and check the crawl space panel, make sure the screws were still tight. Amanda came home on schedule, tanned and happy from the vacation. I told her everything. The police, the investigation, the man in the crawl space. She went pale, then angry, then scared. Called her husband, called the detective, called a contractor to seal up every crawl space access point with steel plates and locks. The detective called me a week later. They'd found evidence of the same person in 4 other houses in the subdivision. All had accessible crawl spaces, all had families with predictable routines. One family had noticed their electric bill was slightly higher than usual, so the guy had been running a small space heater under their house during winter. Another family had wondered why their Wi-Fi seemed slower. He'd been using their network, but they never found him. He'd moved on, disappeared into whatever network of houses he built for himself. The detective said they were working with other jurisdictions, comparing notes, trying to build a profile, but the guy never stayed anywhere long enough after being discovered, never left enough evidence, never hurt anyone or stole anything significant. It's like he just wants to exist, the detective said, wants a place to sleep and the basic utilities. He integrates himself just enough to go unnoticed. I think about that sometimes, about how many houses he's lived in, how many families he's watched without them ever knowing, about how he studies people the way some people study birds, observing habits, documenting patterns, staying just out of sight. Amanda sold a house 6 months later, said she couldn't feel safe there anymore, knowing someone had been living underneath them for 8 months. Knowing he'd listened to their conversations, watched their routines, existed in the negative space of their lives, they moved to a condo. Second floor, no crawl space, security cameras everywhere. I still think about what he said to me that night in the hallway, about how there were 6 other houses he'd already surveyed, already knew the routines of, about how he was good at solving problems quietly. I wonder which house he's in now. Which family has no idea there's someone under their feet right now, lying in the dark, listening to them move around above? Which neighborhood has a patient, careful person living in the spaces between homes, maintaining a dozen escape routes and documenting everyone's schedules in a notebook they'll never see? The worst part isn't that he's out there. The worst part is that he's probably not alone. The detective told me they'd had similar cases reported in 6 different states over the last decade. Different people, same pattern, living in the margins of other people's homes, taking care of small tasks to justify their presence to themselves, disappearing when discovered, helpful ghosts who know your routine better than you do. If you're house sitting for someone, or if you live in a house with a crawl space or attic access, check it. Don't just assume it's sealed because you've never opened it. Look for scratch marks around access panels, loose screws that seem worn, paths through dust that shouldn't be there. And if things are cleaner than you left them, if chores get done that you didn't do, if groceries appear that you didn't buy, you're not losing your mind. You're just not alone. The CEO's coffee mug was still warm when I went to clean his office at midnight, and I was the only person in the building with keys to the executive floor. My name's Aaron, and I've been doing overnight janitorial work for about 7 years now. Started right out of high school when I couldn't afford college. Figured I'd do it for a year or two while I figured things out. 7 years later, here I am. But honestly, I don't mind it. The pay is decent, the work is straightforward, and most importantly, I don't have to deal with people. I work at the Meridian Tower in downtown Portland, 12-story office building, mix of tech companies and financial services firms. The top 3 floors belong to Cascade Financial Group, some investment company that manages portfolios for wealthy clients. My shift runs from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights a week. I'm the only maintenance staff overnight, but there's a day crew that handles trash and restocking. But deep cleaning is all me. The building empties out by 7 p.m. most nights. Security guard named Lawrence works the front desk until 11, then the building goes into night mode. Keycard access only, cameras recording, alarm system armed on certain floors. I have a master key card that gets me everywhere I need to go, plus codes for the alarm panels. It's quiet work, peaceful. I move through empty offices with my cleaning cart, headphones in, podcast playing. Vacuum the carpets, empty the small trash bins the day crew missed, clean the bathrooms, wipe down the break room kitchens. By the time the sun comes up, the building looks perfect for another day of business that I'll never see. I had been working Meridian Tower for about 2 years when things started feeling off. It began with small things. I'd clean the 12th floor executive suite on Monday night, do a thorough job like always, dust the desks, arrange the chairs, make sure everything was pristine. Then on Tuesday night when I came back, little things would be different. A coffee mug I'd washed and put in the cabinet would be sitting on the CEO's desk. The leather couch in his office would have an indentation like someone had been sitting there. The thermostat would be set to 72 degrees instead of the 68 the building management kept it at overnight. I figured maybe the CEO, a guy named Mr. Whitmore, was coming in early. Maybe he arrived at 6 a.m., right when I was leaving, and I just never crossed paths with him. It would explain the coffee, the couch, the temperature. But then I started noticing it was happening during my shift. I have a routine. I always start on the ground floor and work my way up, saving the executive suite for last because it's the smallest area. Takes me about 5 hours to get through floors 1 through 11. Then I hit the 12th floor around 3 a.m. One Thursday night in September, I finished the 11th floor around 2:45 a.m. Took my break, ate the sandwich I'd brought, scrolled through my phone for 15 minutes, headed up to 12 at exactly 3 a.m. The CEO's office door was closed. I always left doors open after I cleaned. Always. It was part of my routine. Open the door, clean the office, leave it open so the air could circulate. I'd cleaned that office on Tuesday night, left the door wide open like I always did. Now it was closed. I stood in the hallway for a minute, listening. The executive floor was dead quiet, just the hum of the HVAC and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. No voices, no movement, nothing. I knocked. Felt stupid doing it. This was an empty building in the middle of the night, but I knocked anyway. No answer. I used my keycard and opened the door. The office looked normal. Desk clean, chairs in place, everything where it should be. But the coffee mug was there again, sitting on the desk. And when I got closer, I could see there was still coffee in it. Not much, maybe an inch at the bottom, but it was there. I touched the mug. Warm. Not hot, but warm enough that the coffee had been poured within the last hour. My heart started beating faster. I was alone in this building. Lawrence, the security guard, left at 11 p.m. The building was locked down. Nobody could get in without a key card, and the system logged every entry. I backed out of the office and went straight to the security office on the ground floor, checked the key card logs on the computer there. My card was the only one that had accessed the building since Lawrence left. No other entries, no other exits. According to the system, I was completely alone. But someone had made coffee in the executive suite between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. I went back upstairs, checked every office on the 12th floor, all empty. Checked the bathrooms, the supply closets, even looked under desks. Nothing. No one. I finished my shift feeling uneasy, but tried to rationalize it. Maybe the coffee had been from yesterday, and I just hadn't noticed it. Maybe the mug retained heat longer than I thought. Maybe I was just tired and paranoid. The next night, Friday, I decided to test something. When I cleaned the CEO's office around 3 a.m., I took the coffee mug and locked it in my cleaning cart, washed it in the break room sink, dried it completely, and put it in the locked compartment where I kept my supplies. There was no way anyone could get that mug without taking my cart. Saturday night, I came in for my shift, worked my way up through the building like normal, got to the 12th floor at 3 a.m. The coffee mug was back on the CEO's desk. Different mug this time, white ceramic, instead of the blue one I'd locked away. But there was fresh coffee in it, steam still rising from the top. I didn't touch it, just backed out of the office and pulled out my phone, called the non-emergency police line. The dispatcher asked if there was an active intruder. I said I didn't know. I was alone in the building according to the logs, but someone was definitely here. She said she'd send an officer to check it out. The cop showed up about 20 minutes later. I met him in the lobby, explained the situation. He looked skeptical but professional. Probably thought I was just a jumpy janitor seeing things in an empty building. We went up to 12 together. I showed him the coffee mug, still warm. Showed him the keycard logs proving no one else had entered. He did a walkthrough of the entire floor, checked every space, found nothing. Is there any way someone could be staying in the building? He asked. Hiding during the day, coming out at night when you're here. I clean every floor every night, I said. I'd notice if someone was living here. What about the other floors? Areas you don't clean every single night? I thought about it. There were some storage areas I only hit once a week. Server rooms I wasn't supposed to enter. Mechanical spaces for HVAC equipment. Maybe, I admitted. He, took a report, said he'd note it in the system, suggested I talk to building management about doing a more thorough security sweep. Then he left, and I was alone again with a mug of coffee I was too afraid to drink. I didn't tell building management. My supervisor was this guy named Ron who barely tolerated me as it was. If I came to him with a story about ghost coffee, he'd probably just fire me and hire someone who didn't cause problems. But I started paying closer attention. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented everything. Took photos with my phone, made notes with timestamps. The pattern became clear. Someone was in the building between midnight and 3 a.m. every single night. They used the executive suite like it was their own office. They made coffee, used the private bathroom, sat on the couch. Sometimes they'd use the computer. I could tell because the monitor would be warm, the chair would be positioned differently, but they were always gone by the time I got to the 12th floor at 3 a.m., and they never triggered the keycard system. That meant they were either already in the building when I arrived, or they had a way in that didn't use the main entrances. I started coming in early, showed up at 9:30 instead of 10 p.m., did a complete sweep of the building before I started cleaning, checked every floor, every office, every closet. Nothing. The building was empty. But by 3 a.m., there would be fresh evidence on the 12th floor. Coffee, disturbed furniture, the smell of someone's cologne lingering in the air. Then I found the shower. The executive floor had a private bathroom attached to the CEO's office, with a full shower that I cleaned once a week. It was never used. Mr. Whitmore apparently preferred to shower at home like a normal person. But one night in early October, I went to clean it and found the shower floor was wet. Not just damp, actually wet, with water still pooled in the corners. There was a towel hanging on the rack that I knew I'd replaced 3 days ago, and it was damp too. Someone had showered here recently, probably within the last few hours. I checked the bathroom cabinet, found a toiletry bag I'd never seen before, shampoo, soap, deodorant, razor, toothbrush, all high-end brands, the kind you'd see in a fancy hotel. Someone had stocked this bathroom like they were living here. I took photos of everything, then checked the rest of the office more carefully. That's when I found the briefcase. It was under the CEO's desk, pushed back into the corner where you wouldn't see it unless you got down on the floor. Expensive leather, combination lock, professional looking. The kind of briefcase a lawyer or executive would carry. I didn't touch it, just took a photo and backed away. That night, I called building security's after-hours number. Not Lawrence. He was long gone. This was the management company that monitored the alarm systems and cameras. I explained what I had been finding. The woman on the phone pulled up the camera feeds, reviewed the footage from the executive floor for the past week. "I'm not seeing anyone," she said. "The cameras show you entering at 3 a.m. each night, cleaning, and leaving. No one else." "What about before I get there? Between midnight and 3? "Hold on, I heard typing." "Okay. I'm looking at last night's footage from the executive suite. Midnight to 3 a.m. I see nothing. Just an empty office." "That's impossible. Someone made coffee. Someone took a shower." "Sir, the camera doesn't lie. There's no one on this footage except you." I asked her to send me the files. She said she couldn't. Policy. Only building management could request footage. I'd have to go through my supervisor. I hung up feeling like I was losing my mind. Either someone had figured out how to move through the building without triggering cameras or keycard readers, or I was hallucinating all of this. I decided to stake out the executive floor. The next night, I came in at 10 p.m. like normal, but skipped my usual routine. Instead, I went straight to the 12th floor, turned off all the lights, and hid in an empty office across the hall from the CEO's suite. Positioned myself where I could see his door through the window. Then I waited. 11 p.m. came and went. Midnight. Nothing. At 12:37 a.m., I saw movement. The CEO's office door opened from the inside. A man stepped out into the hallway. He was wearing a suit, nice one, tailored, the kind that probably cost more than I made in a month. He was maybe 40, clean cut, professional looking. He carried a briefcase, the same one I'd seen under the desk. He walked down the hallway like he owned the place, confident, casual, went into the break room, made himself coffee, came back out, went back into the CEO's office and closed the door. I sat frozen in my hiding spot, trying to process what I was seeing. This guy wasn't sneaking around. He wasn't hiding. He was acting like this was his office, like he had every right to be here. I waited until he was back in the office with the door closed. Then I quietly made my way to the stairwell and down to the security office on the ground floor, pulled up the keycard logs. Still nothing. According to the system, I was the only person in the building. I pulled up the camera feed for the 12th floor, watched the live footage of the hallway outside the CEO's office. Empty. The hallway was empty. The door was closed. No one visible. But I'd just seen him walk down that hallway 90 seconds ago. I went back upstairs, moving quietly, walked down the hallway to the CEO's office, and pressed my ear against the door. I could hear someone inside, typing on a keyboard, a soft click, click, click of keys, papers rustling, a chair creaking. I knocked on the door. The sound stopped immediately. "Security," I called out. "I know you're in there. Open the door." Silence. "I'm calling the police. You need to come out now." More silence. Then I heard footsteps inside, moving toward the door. The door opened. The man in the suit stood there, looking at me with mild annoyance. Up close, I could see he was well groomed, expensive watch, polished shoes. He looked like every other executive I'd ever seen in this building. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice was calm, professional, like I was the one interrupting his workday. "Who are you?" I asked. "What are you doing here?" "I work here," he said simply. "I'm sorry. I don't think we've met. I'm James Pritchard, senior consultant with Cascade Financial." He extended his hand like we were at a networking event. I didn't shake it. "There's no James Pritchard in this building. I've worked here for 2 years. I'm relatively new," he said. "Started about 5 months ago. I work unusual hours, mostly early mornings and late nights. Helps me focus without the usual office distractions. The building is closed." "How did you get in?" He pulled a key card from his pocket and held it up. "Same as everyone else. I have full access to the executive floor." I stared at the card. It looked legitimate. Same design as mine, same logo, same magnetic strip. "That's impossible," I said. "I checked the logs. No one's entered tonight except me." He smiled slightly. "The system's been glitchy lately. I've mentioned it to IT several times. Sometimes my card swipes don't register. Annoying, but not exactly a crisis." Everything he was saying sounded reasonable, plausible, but I knew it was bullshit. "I'm calling building security," I said, pulling out my phone. "Of course," he said, "though I should mention I have written authorization from Mr. Whitmore to work these hours. It's all documented with HR. You can check my employee file if you'd like." I called security. Got the same woman from before. Explained that there was someone in the building claiming to be an employee. "What's his name?" she asked. I looked at him. "James Pritchard." He smiled and nodded. I heard typing on her end. "Okay." I'm showing a James Pritchard, senior consultant, Cascade Financial Group, hired 5 months ago. Access granted to floors 10 through 12. Everything looks legitimate. My stomach dropped. "Check the cameras. 12th floor hallway. Right now." One moment. Pause. I'm looking at the feed. I see you standing in the hallway. No one else visible. "He's right in front of me," I said. "Sir, There's no one else on camera. I looked at James Pritchard. He looked back at me, still smiling that professional, polite smile. Run his keycard number, I said into the phone. Tell me the last time it was used. More typing. Last registered entry was today at 6:47 a.m. Exit logged at 7:53 a.m. Not tonight? No entries logged tonight for that card. I hung up and looked at him. You want to explain how you're in the building without triggering the entry system or the cameras? I already did, he said calmly. The system's glitchy. I've reported it multiple times. He glanced at his watch. Expensive. Swiss probably. Look, I have work to finish. If you need to verify my employment, call HR in the morning. I'm sure they'll confirm everything. In the meantime, I'd appreciate not being interrupted again. He started to close the door. I put my foot against it. I clean this office every night, I said. If you're working here, why haven't I ever seen you before tonight? Because I'm usually gone by 3 a.m., he said. I wrap up my work and leave before the cleaning crew arrives. Tonight, I'm running behind schedule. He looked pointedly at my foot. Now, if you'll excuse me, I moved my foot. He closed the door gently. I heard the lock click. I stood in that hallway for a long time, trying to decide what to do. Everything he'd said could be true. New employee, unusual hours, system glitches, but my gut was screaming that something was very wrong. I went back to the security office and started digging through employee records. Found James Pritchard's file easily enough. Full HR folder, hire date from 5 months ago, salary information, emergency contacts, everything. But there were no photos. Usually employee files had badge photos, but his was blank. I pulled up the payroll system. James Pritchard was getting paid. Direct deposit, twice a month, same as everyone else. Substantial salary too, senior consultant level. I checked the email directory. He had a company email address. I logged into the building's guest Wi-Fi and looked him up on LinkedIn. Found him. Professional profile, 10 years of experience in financial consulting, multiple recommendations from colleagues, previous positions at reputable firms. His profile photo showed the same guy I'd just talked to. Everything checked out. Everything was legitimate, except he didn't show up on cameras. Except his key card didn't log entries. Except I'd been cleaning this building for 2 years and never once saw any evidence of a senior consultant working overnight until 2 months ago. I called my supervisor, Ron, woke him up at 4 in the morning, explained the whole situation. Let me get this straight, Ron said, angry and half asleep. You found an employee working late in his own office, and you're calling me because... Why? Because something's wrong. The cameras don't see him. The keycard system doesn't log him. So the cameras and the keycard system are malfunctioning. That's a tech issue, not a security issue. Is this guy doing anything wrong? Stealing? Damaging property? No, but then leave him alone and do your job. Jesus Christ, Aaron. Don't call me again, unless there's an actual emergency. He hung up. I finished my shift feeling defeated. When I left at 6 a.m., I walked past the CEO's office one more time. The door was closed, lights off. James Pritchard was gone, just like he said he'd be. Over the next week, I started arriving earlier and earlier. Came in at 9 p.m., then 8:30, then 8, trying to catch him arriving to see how he got into the building. Never saw him, but the evidence kept appearing. Coffee mugs, shower condensation, the smell of cologne, papers on the desk that weren't there the night before. I started documenting everything obsessively. Photos, timestamps, detailed notes. Built a whole folder on my phone of evidence that someone was using the executive suite in ways that didn't match the official logs. Then one night, I found the second office. It was on the 10th floor in a corner suite that was supposed to be empty. The company that had leased it moved out 3 months ago, and the space hadn't been re-rented yet. But when I went to clean it, I found it fully furnished. Desk, computer, filing cabinets, diplomas on the wall. There was a nameplate on the desk, James Pritchard, senior consultant. He had a whole office, a real one, fully set up, like he'd been working here for years. I checked the lease records. That suite was listed as vacant. I checked his employee file again. It listed his office as being on the 12th floor in the executive suite, not here on 10. I searched the 10th floor office thoroughly, found business cards with his name, found client files, financial documents, meeting notes. Everything looked legitimate, except none of it matched the company records. That's when I realized what was happening. James Pritchard had created an entire fake identity. He'd hacked or manipulated the HR system, created his own employee records, set up direct deposit, built a LinkedIn profile, established an office presence. He was getting paid as a consultant for a company that didn't know he existed. He wasn't living in the building. He was working here, running his own consulting business under the cover of being a Cascade Financial employee, using their offices, their resources, their reputation, and collecting a salary for a job that was completely fabricated. I took photos of everything in the 10th floor office. Then I went to the CEO's suite and broke in using my master key. The briefcase was under the desk again. I pulled it out, tried the combination. Locked. I searched the desk drawers, found a folder labeled Client Accounts with spreadsheets showing millions of dollars in investments. Found contracts signed by James Pritchard on behalf of Cascade Financial, except I knew Cascade Financial had never authorized these contracts. Found a second phone, a burner, with text messages to clients I didn't recognize. He wasn't just stealing a salary. He was actively conducting business, signing contracts, managing money, all while pretending to be an employee of a legitimate company. I called the police, not the non-emergency line this time. I called 911 and said I'd discovered fraud in progress at my workplace. They sent 2 detectives. I showed them everything. The fake office on 10, the unauthorized client files, the payroll records, the HR manipulation. They explained how he'd been operating in the building for months without anyone noticing. They took it seriously. Contacted the CEO, brought in the head of HR, pulled all the records. Cascade Financial had no idea James Pritchard existed, despite him being on their payroll for 5 months. The detectives reviewed security footage going back months, found the same thing I'd experienced. No sign of him on cameras, no keycard logs, but they found financial records showing he'd deposited over $60,000 in salary from Cascade Financial, plus another $200,000 in fees from clients who thought they were working with a legitimate consultant at a reputable firm. They set up a sting operation, waited in the building the next night, ready to arrest him when he showed up. He never came. As soon as the investigation started, James Pritchard disappeared, stopped coming to the building, stopped using the fake office, vanished completely. His LinkedIn profile went offline. His direct deposit account was closed. The business cards and client files disappeared from the 10th floor office like they'd never been there. The detectives found evidence he'd done this before at 2 other companies in Seattle and San Francisco. Same pattern. Create fake employee records, set up a legitimate-looking office, conduct business under the company's reputation, disappear when discovered. They never caught him. The name James Pritchard was fake, the references were fake, the previous employment history was fake. Everything was designed to look real just long enough to collect money before vanishing. Cascade Financial had to contact all the clients he'd been working with, explain that he wasn't actually their employee, return the fees he'd collected. It was a PR nightmare. I kept working at Meridian Tower for another 6 months after that, but it felt different. I'd walk through those empty offices at night wondering how many other James Pritchards were out there creating ghost identities in the spaces between oversight and verification. I eventually quit, took a day shift job at a hospital, something with more people around. I couldn't handle the isolation anymore. Couldn't shake the feeling that I was sharing the building with people who weren't supposed to exist. Sometimes I think about how long he got away with it. 5 months of showing up at night, working in stolen offices, collecting paychecks from a company that didn't know he was there. How many others are doing the same thing right now in office buildings across the country? The detectives told me cases like this are more common than people think. Someone with enough knowledge of HR systems and building security can create an entire professional identity, work for months or even years before anyone notices the discrepancy. All it takes is finding the gaps in the system, the hours when no one's watching, the records that no one thinks to verify. If you work overnight in an empty building, pay attention to the small things. Coffee that shouldn't be warm, showers that shouldn't be wet, offices that are supposed to be vacant but feel lived in. And if you find evidence that someone's there during hours they shouldn't be, don't assume it's innocent. Don't assume the system is just glitching, because somewhere in those security logs and payroll records, there might be a person who isn't supposed to exist, collecting a salary, using resources, building a fake professional life in the margins of a real company, and they're counting on no one noticing until it's too late. If this story made you think twice about who actually works in your office building, or if you've ever found evidence of someone being somewhere they shouldn't be during off hours, you're not alone. These cases happen more than companies want to admit. Hit that like button if this one made you check your employee directory. Leave a comment about the strangest thing you found in an empty office after hours. And subscribe, because I've got 7 more stories about people who learn that the scariest intruders are the ones who look like they belong. Stay vigilant out there.